Hey everybody, welcome back. Um, if you're joining us for the first time, there's a few presentations before this that I would suggest you check out, as this is a series that builds off of um, each presentation builds off the one before it. So last time we talked about what anxiety, trauma, and stress looks like in the body and in the mind and the connection. And now we're going to look at how does trauma start? We're going to look at the inception of trauma. Um, so It can start with a major event or a series of events, which we discussed when we looked at the types of trauma as well, and we will get into that. So target event is what we want to focus on first. The beginning of trauma is a significant negative or mostly negative event. It's an easily identifiable trauma event, or it's a series of more minor, I want to say in quotes, minor events, which can lead to more CPTSD, or it can even be a near neutral event, as far as most people would understand it. And we'll clarify this a little bit more as we move forward. The client records three main pieces into memory. So when I say client, it's just individual. I'm just speaking as a clinician working with individuals. So the person records three main pieces into memory. As with any memory experience, you take in senses. So anything you see, hear, touch, taste, or smell is coming in from the outside world and influencing your internal state. So the senses of you in that present moment are all that's coming in. Then they record a physical and emotional response or physical emotional reaction. So the shakiness, the tension in the body, the emotion of feeling afraid, scared, angry, whatever that be. And then a negative belief or cognition is developed. So it might be I'm powerless, I'm unlovable, I'm not safe. It could be any of those. So this is a trauma memory when you're considering all three of these. Typical everyday memories are simply going to be just this here, senses, because the physical emotional thing that's going on there is processed in the moment and past because the event is past, and there's no negative cognition because that is counterintuitive to our animalistic nature to survive. We don't want to think poorly of ourselves. So a trauma memory has all three of these, which is the issue. Sensory input then goes into our adaptive memory. So this is processed by the parts of the brain that put it into long-term memory so that we can use this experience to inform future experiences or future expectations. That's what we want, and that's what happens with normal memories. When I say normal, I mean not trauma memories. Trauma includes the negative belief and the physical response that hasn't been completed, and that remains in our active memory. So that is our present moment memory, which is, um, informing us on what we think each thing in the moment means. So when we have past trauma staying in our active memory, it's influencing our present experience and it's distorting it. Our adaptive memory is basically taking in any sensations and recording them into our long-term memory so we can learn about the world and what to expect next, predict what we think will happen next so we are better prepared to survive, which is our brain's kind of goal in this. It is the memory network that is geared towards survival. It's easier to retain and recall information that is associated with our core drive to survive. So that means when we take in experiences, we solidify those, we retain those even better than any other experiences um, that are not usable as far as informing our ability to survive. So if we take in a negative experience, we're going to remember that more than a positive, because remembering that the dog off the leash bit us last time is going to help us be informed in the future to try and avoid that threat. Remembering that we really loved the bounce house that we had at our 10th birthday, it might be a little old, but I mean, I had one when I was 30, so, but we don't need to remember that because that's not useful to help us survive. So we're going to be geared towards recording those negative memories because negative means threat, which means if we know about the threat, we can survive. So it's easier to retain threatening or negative or trauma memories than it is to retain positive memories. The adaptive memory network is responsible for helping to take these experiences in, categorize them, connect them in a way that makes sense for us to understand the external world and makes them easily accessible to pull up at any given moment when they're usable. So they go into the long-term memory, but they are able to be retrieved when necessary. So if you get hungry, you're able to retrieve what food you like and what food you dislike and search through those in your brain as you pick something when you're looking through the fridge. A trauma memory is different. The sensations, the emotional physical charge, and the negative belief about ourselves in that moment, they stay stuck, stored in the active memory. They do not get downloaded or processed into the long term, into the adaptive memory network. They're stuck as though they're happening at that moment still. They're stored outside the adaptive memory, and that makes our body and brain feel as though it's still occurring. And all it takes is the trigger, any association. So any association the brain can make off of the survival instinct. So if you were attacked and then 10 years later you're walking down the street and then all of a sudden you react with panic or anxiety in your body and you're just like, what in the heck is going on? There's no one around. It's a beautiful day outside. You're walking in a nice neighborhood. There's not even any cars, animals, nothing. It's just nice outside. Well, perhaps your eyes out of the peripheral vision noticed a blue door that was it was a very bright blue door, and so it caught your attention. And that could connect in your brain with 10 years ago when you were attacked. You have a memory of one of the people who attacked you having these very bright blue eyes that stood out, or this bright blue shirt. So your brain just made the connection between that random blue door and the trauma memory of the blue eyes or the blue shirt. And it's because it's sitting there actively in your memory, available for you to access at all times, even though it's not usable. It's not something that you want always available. So that gets triggered, which then triggers the negative belief of I'm not safe, and then the negative physical reactions of the adrenaline and all the shakiness and all the tension that you feel in your body. Your brain and body feel as though the trauma is happening again, or that the attacker could attack you again at any second. They're still around right now in the present moment. The response that you had in that trauma memory never got completed. The sensations that you had in your body are trapped because the trauma memory never got completed. It never got processed through the brain and downloaded. The brain was never able to discard the emotion and the physical sensation and the fear and the negative belief. So it's stuck as this lump experience that you would normally only experience in the present moment. It's stuck there. And so it keeps occurring every time it's triggered as though it's happening in the present, in the present, in the present. When we look at trauma, we want to look at how it affects our memory, because we talked about long-term memory, active memory. So explicit memory is another word for active memory, which means these are things that you have available at the moment. You can consciously recall them very quickly. So if I ask you your name, boom. If I ask you your favorite food, boom. But if I ask you what street did you live on when you were 7, you may have to kind of pull that out of your memory banks, right? It's not going to be just right there available for you. Okay. So let's break these down and look at these a little bit. Semantic memory. This is just general knowledge. You know what a bike is when you see a bike. So how does trauma impact this? Well, it can make it difficult to recall these words when you see these images. Recall the images when you think of the word. The parts of the brain that are involved in this, are spread throughout the brain, and they can have a difficult time due to trauma impact that you've experienced, being able to recall these associations, even though that they're very basic general knowledge. Okay. Episodic memory is this autobiography that you have about your life. So you know that things happened in certain chronological order. You know that you had your 3rd birthday before your 7th. You know that you went to Disneyland at 6. You went to Magic Mountain at 8. Okay. So, and it also includes all the details of who, what, where, why, all that stuff. So you remember that you were riding on a bike and you were riding in a street and and you crashed and, it hurt kind of bad, and you remember that there was a crowd there and you felt embarrassed. What trauma can do is it can basically take away this access or shut down this episodic memory, and it breaks it into fragments, and the fragments can be spread around, and they don't make any kind of sense as far as time in your memory. They get shifted around in pieces. That's why people with trauma maybe remember pieces of things that just come up, but they may not be in order. They might remember a piece of trauma that happened when they were 7, and then a piece of trauma that happened when they were 6, and then 8, and then 4. These things get broken up and distributed and just kind of distorted. The hippocampus is the main area of the brain that's responsible for these kinds of memories and for recalling these and creating these. Interestingly enough, when you're in anxiety or trauma response, the hippocampus is incorporated into the process of the trauma response by the amygdala. So the amygdala, which is the thing that scans information and decides threat or not threat, will utilize the hippocampus to assist it in releasing various hormones and chemicals for the threat response system in the body. So if the hippocampus is doing that, sounds like it's probably not going to be doing very well at its main job of recording, recalling, and filing and understanding memory and sensory input coming in. So that kind of makes sense why that stuff gets kind of fragmented and distorted. Emotional memory is simply the emotions that you felt in that moment. So this happens in your midbrain, in the limbic system where your emotion is, mainly in the amygdala. So when you experience shame or anxiety, in that moment where you crashed on your bike, the next time that you see a bicycle or have a big fall, you may experience these emotions again because there's an association there. There's a connection there. There's an emotional memory that you have. So after you experience a trauma, these emotions can get triggered and become very painful and feel as though they're happening in the moment again, and they can be as intense as they were at the initial time when they really should dissipate because the event is past, so the memories should slowly dissipate and fade, the emotional memories. The amygdala is the main thing that you want to consider here as far as this process of emotional memory. And again, it's tied to the hippocampus, which is part of this process as well. Lastly, we have your procedural memory. So this is memory of how to do things. Okay, so you can ride a bike without thinking because it is something that you have done many times. So this is part of your implicit memory, your long-term memory, or your kind of your unconscious memory. So like when you get in a car and you put on a seatbelt, you don't think I'm going to put on a seatbelt when you walk to the car, or I'm putting on my seatbelt, I'm pulling it over, I'm clicking it. You just do it because this is something you've done so many times that it's been downloaded into your long-term implicit memory. So your brain just knows to do it for you. When you get in a car, it knows to process this procedure. Trauma can impact the patterns that you've developed with procedural memory. It can interrupt them, make them more complicated, make you have to think about them more. So the example here is a person can tense up and unconsciously they can get a rigid posture, and that can result in pain and numbness. This is a trauma survival kind of thing. So quick side note is if you have let's say you have a girl, she's in she's in high school, 17, she's popular cheerleader, everybody likes her, she's very nice, she does great in school, good grades. One day the teacher asks her to stay after class and assault her. Well, now you notice that she starts to walk around, her head down, shoulders slumped in, some things that you might think obvious, like she starts wearing baggier clothes or covering her body more. But what we don't tend to notice or pay attention to the reasoning behind is that she's slumping her shoulders and hanging her head down, and we think, oh, she's just sad. Well, I'm sure she is because she experienced a traumatic event that should have never happened. But really what's happening too is her body is trying to protect her. If she's smaller, she can't be noticed by the predator. If she doesn't make eye contact, people won't question her or think that, she wants their attention. So these things actually can serve, to protect her in those moments. But as she gets older in life, being withdrawn, head down, slumped shoulders, those things are not only going to cause physical issues, but they're not going to help her to develop, they're not going to assist her in developing appropriate interpersonal relationships. Head down, shoulders slumped, quiet, withdrawn is not usually going to attract the partner that you're looking for that's confident and respectful. It's going to tend to probably attract people who can, relate to you because maybe they have their own trauma, or possibly even people who are predators are looking to take advantage because they see someone who looks weak, who looks like they can be kind of manipulated. So it ends up becoming a hindrance later in life, even though it may actually help, protect her in that moment. So finally, to end this, I just want to share with you a little analogy that I use to help my clients understand how trauma memories work and how EMDR helps process these, because I do come from an EMDR perspective and lens. So basically, you have the world, and from that, which is just anything outside of you, you have all your senses: see, hear, touch, taste, smell, all that stuff coming in. That's all put onto your desktop of your computer screen. So this is your present experience, is what's happening on your desktop. Present moment, sensory input, boom, here. When you sleep, you go into rapid eye movement or REM sleep. So you can see the connection here. EMDR uses bilateral stimulation, which means finger or light or whatever the therapist uses waves back and forth, and the person follows it with their eyes. So their eyes are moving back and forth. This happens during REM sleep. When you're in deep REM sleep, which is why sleep is very important, by the way, especially after studying or learning a new skill, your brain is downloading the information from your desktop to your long-term memory. It is sorting through all the information, keeping what is important to inform your future experiences, and it is discarding any of the junk, the negative beliefs, the negative emotions and feelings. It's getting rid of all that stuff. It's also doing a quick scan and deleting any unnecessary information. So if I ask you about how was your birthday dinner the next day, you'll be like, it was great. The restaurant was amazing. There was such a good vibe in there. There were all these people. My friends were all there. John had this really cool outfit on. I loved the shirt. And then I was so stoked because he bought me the shirt for my gift. And I had the veal parmesan and it was very good. And then I had ice cream and it was pistachio. You can remember all these details. If I ask you about your birthday dinner a month later, you might say it was really good. The food was great. There was a lot of people there. I really loved the restaurant. I think I had the veal, which was amazing. And then I had some great ice cream. If I ask you a year later, you'll be like, oh yeah, we went to um, we went to that one Italian restaurant on Fifth Street down there, and I remember that there was a lot of people there, so that was pretty cool, and the food was really good. You don't need to remember those very explicit details, because you need to make room in your brain, even though it's gigantic. Your brain wants to consolidate information and get rid of the little things that don't matter. You don't need to remember all those details about your birthday dinner 2 years ago or a year ago. You just remember that it was a positive experience, maybe the restaurant and who was there, or a few people who were there. So your brain is clearing all the unnecessary information, including negative beliefs, and all the physical stuff is gone because the emotion has been processed, because the moment is over. So the present experience downloads into long-term memory, and now your brain understands this is past experience. The information on your desktop and the information stored in files that are categorized in your hard drive, they help to inform your expectations of future experiences. Trauma does not get processed. It goes right back to the desktop. It is stuck in the active explicit memory, the short-term memory. And as long as it is stuck there, it is a corrupt file, and it is short-circuiting the operation of your computer, which is your brain, and making it so that you have these adverse or abnormal responses to present day experiences. Because this trauma should be here, and it should only be pulled up when there is something that actively connects to it. And the emotion and the negative belief should have been dropped out of here and thrown into the trash and deleted during REM sleep. But it doesn't happen. So trauma just stays on the desktop in your active memory with the negative belief and the negative sensations. And that's why we have the trauma response. EMDR essentially mimics REM sleep, and with bringing the person's awareness to their body sensations and to the memory, which they don't have to talk about, by the way, they just have to have an image to connect to and a body sensation to try and connect to. It basically helps do kind of a pseudo REM, or to push this trauma memory, get rid of the negative belief and process the emotional response, and put the information into the hard drive. So now, instead of an open wound with all the debris and crap in it, the negative experience, the emotion, the negative belief, you clear that out, and now the wound can heal. And now you have a scar, and scars don't hurt. They're just bad memories. So the trauma experience loses its charge when you process it into long-term memory. Just like every other event that you have, good, bad, neutral, when you think of, you don't have this emotional, physical overreaction. You may have some emotional or physical response to losing someone, but that's because it's a traumatic event. But over time, that lessens unless you have complicated grief or trauma due to that. So here's a couple of resources for you to look at. The infographic that I shared was off of the website from NCABM, which is a great resource for information on trauma and many other issues related to mental health. And then more information on the adaptive memory process. You can look at it through this article that I cited here that's in the Journal of Experimental Psychology. And it really helps to understand using the computer analogy, I think, because most people, pretty much all people, probably have access to some kind of experience with computers at this point. So, when you open your computer, whatever's on your desktop is going to get your attention first. So whatever's on your desktop is going to be the most likely thing to get activated in your day. You have to click on a couple files to get to the long-term memory stored on your hard drive. So those things aren't going to get activated before the files that are on your desktop. You're going to see the pictures on the desktop before you see the pictures that you have to click a couple files and find on your desktop, on your hard drive in your long-term memory. That's kind of essentially what's going on with trauma. And it's stuck there. It's a virus. It's a corrupt file. So it can't get processed or downloaded into your hard drive, because if it did, it would destroy your computer. So if you did have trauma just go into your adaptive memory, your long-term memory with all that stuff attached to it, it would just, destroy your computer or your brain. So it's a protective mechanism to keep it in active memory, and it's also confusion on the brain's part. It doesn't understand that that needs to be processed, because it's like, no, this is happening still, because they're still having the emotional response and they're still having the negative belief about that event occurring. So that's kind of what's going on with trauma and why it's stuck. I know this can be a pretty complicated concept for some people. If you have any questions, please reach out to me on the website, The Anxious Mammal. Just go to the contact page and send me your questions. I will absolutely get back to you. Also, if you go to the website and at the top there, you'll see a section that says blog. If you click on that, there are quite a few articles that I've written about this process and other processes that all tie together to understand trauma, and they go into broad descriptions all the way into very detailed descriptions. So you can read that information at your own pace, download the information at your own pace, and you can even write down some questions and send them to me through the contact page, and I will absolutely answer them for you. So our next one, now that we talked about the inception of trauma, the beginning of trauma, next presentation is going to discuss the continuation of trauma. What does trauma look like as we move forward in our life? What does it impact? How does it intertwine into our daily life, our interpersonal relationships, and how does it make our life more difficult and complicated to navigate? So I hope you guys will join me for the next one. Thank you.